Good morning. It is Monday, May 5th. Happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody. This is another episode of Marlins Monday. My name is Eric Wiedeke. As always, you can follow me on X/Twitter at Eric Wiedeke. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on the video here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. Still getting great content up for the Dolphins, the Marlins, the Heat, the Panthers as they continue their playoff run, the Hurricanes, football, basketball, baseball. The baseball team's making a great comeback right now for the Hurricanes. Lots of really good stuff on the channel here. And of course, the Miami Marlins. So I do want to get into it this week. A little bit of a struggle for the Marlins, going 1-5, being swept in LA, coming back to Miami and losing that series versus the A's 2-1. And it's really been a lot of the same. We spoke a little bit last week about how the starting pitching was really struggling, and it's just been more of the same for the Marlins to this point. Rotation woes are continuing. And now, granted, you had Edward Cabrera yesterday, who gave you probably his best start of the season, went 5 2/3 innings, allowed 2 earned runs with Nick Fortes back behind the dish. And I'm interested to see how that potentially affects the Marlins pitching staff going forward as, you really kind of can't help but realize that the bottom kind of fell out of this thing as soon as Nick Fortes did have to go down with that injury. But the Marlins rotation, I'm just going to read out the numbers here so far. You go Max Meyer with a 3.92 ERA. Edward Cabrera now is down to a 6.29 ERA. You've got Cal Quantrill at an 8.10. Sandy at an 8.31. Gillespie was at an 8.65 before he got sent down. Beyozo at a 4.97. It's not sustainable for a team that wants to stay competitive. And granted, I think we're kind of teetering on the edge of the wheels, kind of really falling off here on this thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the starting pitching has just been abhorrent, quite frankly, lately for the Marlins. You're talking about an ERA north of 9 over their last 10, 11 games as a staff for the starters. And like I said, you do wonder if Nick Fortes can help. You also wonder when the reinforcements are coming. Ryan Weathers had his first start in Jacksonville Saturday night, so you're hoping maybe one more rehab start for him, and then he's back. Yeah, Yuri discussing that he's going to take 6 more rehab starts pretty much before he's ready to come back. So he's about, give or take a month away still for this team. And then in the meantime, you've got Adam Mazer, you've got Robbie Snelling as potential options. Mazer definitely before Snelling. Snelling still in AA. Struggled a little bit in his last start, but overall still having a really quality season at Pensacola. You've got Jansen Junk, who the major league numbers aren't very good on him, but he's only had a handful of starts at the big league level. The stuff is really good, and he's been fantastic for Jacksonville. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him, maybe come up and make a start for this team if guys continue to struggle, particularly, the Cal Quantrills and Valente Beyosos of the world for the Marlins. That's going to have to get better because this upcoming week, it's LA starting, at least at home, and then you get the White Sox. So a little bit of a mixed bag here over the course of these next 6 games, but regardless, the Marlins are going to have to put forth much, much better starting pitching if they want to, keep their heads above water this week and make up some of the ground that they've lost in recent weeks, as they are now down to a season low 7 games under 500 at 13-20 through 33 games. But, it hasn't all been bad for the Miami Marlins. You've got a guy really swinging a hot bat of late, Kyle Stowers. You do just want to show him some love. He was responsible pretty much single-handedly for the Marlins' sole victory against the Athletics, with a 2-homer day on Saturday being capped off by the walk-off grand slam against Mason Miller. Stowers for the week, a 423 hitter, 444 on base, 923 slugging, 4 homers and 10 runs batted in, as well as some pretty decent defense in the outfield. Obviously, he had the blunder in the 9th inning against the A's on Sunday. But overall, still a really solid week for Kyle Stowers and a really solid season for Kyle Stowers. An OPS north of 900 through about the first 5 to 6 weeks of the year here. And it's been really consistent from him. From day one, he's been this guy. And so I do think you have to kind of consider, well, maybe this is just who Kyle Stowers is at the major league level at this point. Granted, like I said, small sample size theater, but you can't help but be encouraged by what you're seeing in Stowers. You would like to see potentially, they were talking on the broadcast yesterday about how many lineups the Marlins have used and how many lineups Clayton McCullough has used. And really, I don't know if it's a great thing that they've used as many lineups as they have. Obviously, I understand that there's a good bit of kind of trying to fit the pieces together and understanding the guys that you have in your clubhouse. And that process might be a little bit younger or a little bit longer with younger players like the Marlins have, because guys are still figuring out who they are at the big league level, much less knowing who they are at this level. But you have to go with what the numbers say, and the numbers bear out right now that Kyle Stowers is your best hitter. So he needs to be continually atop your order. And then we're going to talk about another guy in Dane Myers, who I think needs to be atop the order. A little bit later on, but I do just want to get into that. Fantastic week for Kyle Stowers. It feels really good for a guy like him after the way that he struggled in 2024. And I'll be the first one to admit I was confused as to why he even made the roster out of spring. But Kyle Stowers has done everything you could possibly want him to do in improving and getting better over the course of the offseason and into 2025. So, hats off to Kyle Stowers. He's been the Marlins' best hitter by a pretty good margin this season. But we'll talk about guys that have also hit pretty well for the Marlins and guys that are going to get some opportunities here. Dane Myers getting the start in center field all 3 days against Sacramento feels pretty significant here. Obviously, the last time we'd seen Jesus Sanchez in center field, he was getting turned around quite a bit, and it stands to reason that maybe he, tweaked his back a little bit in the midst of that, kind of twisting in the wind against the Dodgers. But I have the feeling this is kind of the turning point to where Myers is going to stick in center field. He made a fantastic throw on Sunday to get an outfield assist on a run coming into or a run attempting to come into score. He hit the 2-run double. He's been fantastic in his own right, has an OPS over 900, hitting over 340 for the Marlins this season. He's been consistently one of their best hitters. Also a sneaky stolen base guy, up to 5 steals on the year. His last week, he's hit 533 with a 632 on base and 1,000 OPS, 2 homers, 8 runs batted in, and 3 steals in that time frame. I think he's absolutely seized the center field job, and he's another guy that I think you have to have in the top of the lineup. I understand. I really kind of don't. Well, I understand Wagaman, over his last 15, 20 games has been hitting legitimately pretty well. But right now, you just got to keep it as simple as possible. Myers and Stowers have to be atop your order. I'm not even sure about Edwards being atop your order. And I think we're going to talk about some guys. Another guy who's getting an opportunity now with injuries, and that's going to be Javier Sanoa. Otto Lopez, it seems before Saturday's game, kind of twisted his ankle in pregame warmups and was removed after the top of the first. Turns out he's got a grade 2 ankle sprain, and he's going to be on the shelf for a couple weeks here. And it's going to be Javier Sanoa's opportunity to earn that everyday playing time at second base. And I think Javi's going to run with it. He's a guy that he just never has a bad at bat, really patient approach at the plate. He's got good speed. He's a really solid glove just about anywhere that you put him in the field. So I think he's going to come up and he's going to take that role from Otto. And, maybe when Lopez comes back, it's more in that utility role. And that's where he can kind of get back to himself offensively a little bit here for the Marlins. But Myers and Sanoa, 2 guys that are getting opportunities here in the face of some of these injuries that the Marlins have faced. Sanoa, another option to potentially hit leadoff for this team. I know they've stuck by Xavier Edwards. He was fantastic last season. Showed everything you would want out of a leadoff hitter last season. He hasn't been that guy this year. The approach doesn't quite seem to be the same. The steals, he said he was going to steal 60 bags this year. He hasn't really run as much as you would hope when he has gotten on base. So I think that there might be a shakeup here coming for this Marlins team in the lineup. Although, compared to the starting pitching issues, the lineup issues pale in comparison, especially when you've got guys like Stowers and Myers who can kind of anchor your offense for a couple weeks when they really get hot and get going. Nick Fortes in his return today looked pretty decent. Hit the ball really hard a couple of times. Had a single. Had a great tag on that throw by Dane Myers to get Gio Urshela at the plate. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Marlins end up doing with the catcher position. It doesn't seem like Agustin Ramirez is going to be going down. Liam Hicks, I don't think he's going to go down considering he's a Rule 5 draft pick and they have to keep him on the roster if they want to keep him in the organization. And then on top of that, Hicks has been pretty good with the bat overall. If you remove maybe the first week or two of the season, he's been a guy that's been about a 740, 750 OPS guy behind the dish. He blocks the plate well, doesn't have a very good arm, doesn't have a great pop time, but he does a lot of the other stuff you would like to see out of that catcher position. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of divvy up that time. I do think Ramirez is likely to see a good portion of his at-bats coming as a designated hitter. And I think that the Marlins are fine with that, especially when you consider what they have waiting in the wings in the minors and a guy like Joe Mack, who projects to be a dynamic defensive catcher, in addition to the things that he can do in the batter's box. So I think the Marlins, not that they're going to give up on developing Aggie defensively at that spot, but I don't think he's going to be prioritized behind the dish. When you have a guy like Nick Fortes, who's, especially when the starters are struggling like this, and you have a guy in Fortes who's at least a veteran who can kind of guide the staff through some of these struggles here. And Hicks, who hasn't been shabby himself enough, at least not enough to be DFA'd or have to be given up for, just to go down to two catchers on the roster. So I ultimately that stuff will end up sorting itself out. The cream does eventually rise to the top in these situations. And I think that you have guys at other spots that are struggling to where, Ramirez might get a shot at first base here, especially if Matt Mervis continues to struggle. Because he's a guy that I think has been really, really bad over the last couple of weeks. He's got to get the bat on the ball in order to be effective. You can't hit home runs if you're not making contact. And he has not been making much contact lately whatsoever. So he's been out of lineup the last few days, and it's kind of been an earned drop in playing time for him. I think that there's possibilities that you can go to maybe Eric Wagaman potentially playing left field, and platooning with Jesus Sanchez in the immediate, and then you can go to a Ramirez and Mervis platoon at first base with or Ramirez can play or can DH when Wagaman's playing first or what have you. There's a lot of different options that the Marlins have, and that's one of the things that they do have that's a strength on this team is a lot of guys that can play a bunch of different positions. And then another guy that I would like to see get a little bit more playing time this week is Ronnie Simon, man. He's a guy that he got pinch hit for yesterday in the 7th inning, and I'm not going to criticize the decision like a lot of people did. Yes, I like Ronnie Simon. I like his approach at the plate. I like his defensive versatility in the field. I think he gives you a lot of the same things that Sonoha does. Maybe a little bit more power in the bat, maybe a little bit less plate discipline. But regardless, I really like Ronnie Simon. But in the 7th inning of that game, in a tie ball game, when you need a guy that might have a little bit more pop with a runner just on first, if the guy was in scoring position, I understand keeping Simon in the game because a single can score him. But with Jesus Sanchez, I don't mind them prioritizing the power tool in that instance in the 7th inning of a game that's tied and you're just trying to make something happen. So I don't have any issues with that. I did see people have problems with that, but I don't have problems with that. It just comes down to, for me, putting these guys in the best situations to score runs and succeed. And I think that that's going to be number one. I think they're in a better spot for that, considering what's happened with these injuries of late. And I mean that, without any offense to Jesus Sanchez or Otto Lopez, I just think that the guys that are replacing them, and Dane Myers and Javi Sanoa, are guys that put the team in a better position to win. Dane Myers doubly so in the field and in the batter's box right now. And Javier Sanoa, same could be said for him. Otto Lopez has a great reputation as a fielder, but he struggled at second base this year. And I think Javi is a guy that can play a really strong second base, and he gives the Marlins just a different skill set than what Otto gave them overall. I think he just handles the bat a good bit better. And I'd like to see those guys at the top of the order, whether it's Simon, Sanoa. I think that those two guys have the potential to be really good table setters. I think Myers is a prototypical number 3 hitter. Stowers, and right now there's not a better option at 4 than Stowers. And then kind of just let everything else play out as it will from there. I understand that there are certain guys, you want to keep their confidence up. But at the same time, you have to prioritize production. And that's something that this organization is going to have to figure out as they go along. And I understand that this year is a little bit more about development for them than wins and losses. And believe me, I'm not opposed to that on its face. I came in clear-eyed about what the season was going to be for the Marlins. I didn't expect them to be, a playoff contender or what have you. But I do think that you've seen the upside for this group and what they can provide. And so I think you can also attempt to maximize winning within that. The Marlins are a team that they played far and away more rookies in the field than any other team in baseball this year. They more than doubling up second place at 128 games now played by rookies to this point. So I think within that, the development comes just by giving these guys reps. You put together the best lineup possible right now, and if that includes a Sanoa, that includes a Simon at the top of the order. Those are 2 guys that are getting that development. And Xavier Edwards, it doesn't mean that he has to be booted from the lineup completely, but he can be an 8 hitter, he can be a 9 hitter. The Marlins have those options, and I just like to see them use them. Just get a little bit creative here as they've started to slump a little bit. And that's really, really going to be key for them if they're going to keep the wheels from falling off here, because the wheels can fall off, and they can fall off starting tomorrow night. The Marlins play the Dodgers for 3 at home at Lone Depot Park, and then they go to Chicago to face the White Sox. So you're really hoping probably for like a 3-3 week, something like that. Get 1 against the Dodgers, get 2 against Chicago. It'd be nice to have a winning week. Although I think with the Dodgers on the schedule, that's, a really tough ask for this team, especially when you consider what the Marlins have going on the bump in the 3 games against LA. It's Sandy, who's got a career ERA just shy of 10 against the Dodgers. Cal Quantrill, who has struggled mightily this season for the Marlins. And then Valente Belloso, who, he could give you 3, maybe 3.5 solid innings, but he hasn't really shown that he can give you much length beyond that. It's going to be a tough spot for the Marlins. They're going to need the bats. It's going to have to be on the offense right now. It's going to have to be on Dane Myers. It's going to have to be on Kyle Stowers. It's going to have to be on Connor Norby to get it together. It's going to have to be on Xavier Edwards to get it together. I mean, those are 2 guys between Norby and Edwards who, if they were last year's versions with what you're getting from Stowers and Myers right now, your offense would be humming. You'd be in a really good spot there offensively. So they're going to need to get all hands on deck from the hitters. Hopefully Nick Fortez's return allows the pitching staff to return to at the very least, major league average during this stretch here. But the Marlins 3 games against the Dodgers at home. It's going to be a tough series, but then 3 games in Chicago to play the White Sox in a series that quite frankly, they should win. So the Marlins trying to avoid the wheels falling off. If they do get swept by the Dodgers, sitting at 13-23, you kind of have a feeling, all right, well, you know what, we've kind of hit that unofficial point of no return in the season. But the Marlins will attempt to stave that off. And at the very least, you're getting some entertaining seasons by some of the young players that you hope to see as building blocks going forward for this team. That is all that I have for this week on Marlins Monday. My name is Eric Wiedeke. You can follow me on X/Twitter at Eric Wiedeke. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for all the content on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. And then, as always, remember to download Prize Picks, the best daily fantasy sports app on the market right now. Just pick 2 players, any sport, choose a given prop, higher or lower. Start winning today. Use promo code 5FIVE for $50 in bonus funds on your first lineup of $5 or more with Prize Picks. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you next week with hopefully better news for this team. But stick with us here. It's a season of development. It's a season of watching the young players. And at the very least, you know, you've got a handful that you can really kind of get excited about for this team. So I will continue to chronicle this all the way through the summer. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.